This is The Hypothesis, the show where industry experts debate and discuss growth marketing approaches, digital advertising tactics, measurement plans, as well as creative and growth strategies.
I'm Eric Sloan, VP of Data and Strategy at Thrive Digital.
I'm Tyler Power, and I'm the Director of Creative Services here at Thrive.
I'm your moderator, lay marketer, and asker of clarifying questions, Santana Blanchett. Hi again, friends. So today we are talking about something pretty specific, not a hugely broad topic in comparison to what we normally talk about. Today's hypothesis is that great ads cannot overcome bad landing pages. So, question one, can you very clearly define for the audience what a landing page is? And the reason that I ask this is because about a year ago, we had a very interesting internal debate over websites versus landing pages. And so I think let's just set the record straight. What is a landing page?
I remember this.
Oh yeah, drama.
Yeah, do you remember where we landed on it?
Yes.
I'll give my 30-second sort of elevator speech here and then feel free to jump in.
Sure.
First, we had to sort of define what the difference was because anything can be a landing page. And a lot of our clients treat anything as a landing page, whether it's a home page, whether it's a PLP or PDP, product listing page, product details page. But I think the difference is website is built to inform. There's a whole bunch of information there. There's a whole bunch of actions you can take. You can navigate at your leisure to whatever content you want. And then eventually you may make a decision to become a lead or to purchase an item. A landing page has one sole purpose, and that's to convert. And so the difference, I think, between the two, when we talk about action or attention ratios, a landing page is 1-to-1, right? You have one thing you want to do, one conversion. A website could be 12-to-1, 14-to-1, 15-to-1, depending on what's on that page. Landing pages should have the sole purpose of a CTA that's you either become that lead or you make that purchase. There should be no other distraction there except for that intention.
Interesting. I disagree.
Oh.
The way that I look at it is it's basically the entrance to whatever experience that the end user is having with that brand digitally at that moment, right? And so they can enter through a product listing page, as you mentioned before. They can enter through a very specific type of landing page. But I would say that conversion focused, remove all distractions, that type of landing page, to me anyways, seems like a subset of landing pages in general, right? And so the kind of umbrella term landing page can include a blog post. If someone is coming in through organic search, through some kind of SEO strategy or something like that, that's still considered a landing page because they're sort of being introduced to the brand, and that's the beginning, that's the start of their experience.
So I guess it depends what we're talking about. Is it a page that you land on, or is it a traditional landing page in the sense of a traditional landing page?
This is where I'm jumping into the ring, flying in with my chair to hit you both over the head. I think that from a devil's advocate semantics perspective, sure, Eric, technically whatever page you land on as a user is a landing page. And that makes sense from your perspective as a data nerd, where you're first touch, first interaction. And I get that. But from the design, content, advertising world perspective, I do think we are narrowing it down to this idea of a conversion focused page, not the first page introduction. It's a landing page specifically, which is a banner ad. It's a thing that we have defined as marketers to be this thing.
For sure. But I guess the pushback that I have on that is that a lot of different components of a website are used as landing pages in advertising, right? And so one of the most critical things you can do when choosing where to send your traffic is to connect the context of where someone was when they first saw that ad and what you're trying to get them to do with the experience that they're going to land on, right? And so many organizations actually just use their homepage, or they use product page or something along those lines as the landing page. And I would say that that's used far more often than these conversion specific remove all distractions type landing pages. And so to me, kind of negating that entire section of our industry, I suppose maybe that's website experience, but I would still say that when marketing teams are thinking about that experience, they really should be putting in just as much effort into the design of where they're sending most of the traffic as they would with conversion focused landing pages.
I would agree with that. I often say, if we're not talking specifically about an intent focused landing page, that your homepage should be your best landing page, right? That should be your highest converting, most useful, most functional page on your site, where you can gather information at a glance, hopefully within the scroll depth of that homepage, and then make your decision in terms of what it is you're going to do, whether you're going to gather more information and go into those deeper pages, or you're ready to convert on that homepage. I think as UI UX people too, it's up to us to also facilitate and foster that journey, and making sure that we have those conversion points if they choose to come through that homepage portal as their avenue, that within that journey we are supplying them with the jump off points and the different conversion points when they're ready to make that decision. So whether that's on a blog, whether that's on a PLP, whether that's on a PDP, we're trying to remove the barriers and remove the time and pages in between them landing there and then making that purchase or lead decision.
Absolutely. And I think one of the biggest sort of fall on your face moments that I see from marketing teams is like trying to take all of the different contexts that they're putting ads into the marketplace with. And so let's say you're advertising on Meta and you are putting in all this different creative and you're testing all this different creative, but all of those ads are going to a landing page that is just a white paper, gated white paper or something like that, with the exact same landing page and the exact same headline, etc. And so from my perspective, that's a horrible user experience for, 95% of the users at least. And that may convert at a higher rate than, let's say, the homepage. And so you may go from a 1% conversion rate to a 2% conversion rate on that landing page, but you're actually making the experience worse for 98% of the people that actually don't convert. And so that's my sort of, I guess, angst when it comes to landing pages, and especially the trend probably about 10 years ago where it was like all about like these hyper-focused landing pages that remove the menu, remove all distractions, all those kinds of things. Because all you end up doing is you end up in a race to the bottom. You end up in a race to lower quality leads because you're trying to force everyone through that same experience.
It almost feels like another argument, though. Like, I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. I think one of my big problems with advertising and content marketing, like my discipline specifically, is there's a lot of like misleading our audience because it's convenient. We default to the same CTAs. We use like really like obfuscated language, and it all leads to like one very similar experience or something that suits us. I think to your point, like we do need to say, based on where we think this person's at in the funnel, here's the message and here's the appropriate page or resource to lead them to. So I agree with you there. Like anything can be a landing page depending on the offer and the place of the funnel they're at. But I don't know if we have the expertise here to critique entire website UX and UI in this episode. Like it almost serves us better for this argument to just talk about that specific type of landing page.
That's totally fair. Yeah. And we can talk about it in the context of like all of the things that I'm mentioning about experience and all of that too.
Okay. So for the sake of this conversation, we're talking about middle to bottom of funnel landing pages today, where it's that like escape room style.
The only way you can get it is by clicking on the logo to go to the homepage.
Oh, not that logo. Surprise. You just bought something.
It's what I do every time I land on a landing page. I just click the logo.
Is it?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Before even reading the headline, I just click the logo because I know it's a paid landing page that it's going to be really specific and I want to see the homepage.
I'd love to see you on a Hotjar session and follow you.
Agreed. Yeah. We've discovered a secret reason why Eric is like pro homepage, because he hates the landing page.
To be clear, I'm not pro homepage to use the homepage as the landing page for all advertising. It's just that what I have found is that those types of landing pages just are limited in the amount of information that they provide. Sometimes they're so small that marketing teams are trying to remove all of the friction possible, that there's just no actual real information unless I sign up or unless I fill out a lead form. And I know that I'm going to get called by a sales rep for weeks if I do that. So I'm just not going to do it.
It is interesting. So my next question was actually, where are people getting landing pages wrong, and what are some of the most common mistakes you see? And I think one of the things that comes up immediately from both of you is like this idea of getting trapped, right? Like, and I think that made sense when landing pages were a big thing 10 years ago and people weren't like wise to it yet, but now I don't know how effective it is if you like I have noticed more and more landing pages that there are actual menu items to navigate out of there. So what do you think landing pages are getting wrong right now? What are some of those common mistakes?
I think it's trying to find the balance of the right amount of information. Like, you're talking to three different people that interact with landing pages very differently. Some people want just what they came there for. And to Eric's point, some of them maybe want a little bit more that is in line with what they would get on the homepage. So I think finding that balance of hierarchy and prioritization of content in order to achieve whatever that action is you want. I agree, it does feel a little bit like an escape room when you get there and it's just a logo and there's no navigation. Most people will either click the back button or, to Eric's point, the first thing he'll click on is the logo. So people are savvy enough to not just sit there and like, I'm trapped. But I think you need to curate the content to whatever it is you want that action to be taken. And I also think you don't want to pull the bait and switch, right? So I think it's also, yes, the landing page is a big part of it, but it's also where they're coming from. If your ads is successful in getting them to that landing page, you better hope that ad and that landing page equals the promise that ad sort of served to you, right? Because otherwise people are like, all right, you like totally pulled the rug out from under my feet. That's not why I was here. You tricked me. I'm out. So you need that journey to be complete. If you're in control of that paid environment or wherever they're coming from, whether it's a display banner or a paid ad, whatever's happening there better match with the product that they are getting on the landing page side. And I think you create trust there. If you don't, they're gone and you've lost it anyways, right? So I think what they need to get right is obviously the ad that they're serving up, and then the content that they're using there to support it, and making sure that those two are working in conjunction with each other to keep that person on the site to, either convert or at least give them the information that they need to eventually make that decision, and we can retarget them later.
So are you telling us that you shouldn't run ads that say like free beer and then the landing page sells accounting software or something?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Get really high click-through rate.
Yeah.
Also really high bounce rate.
Huge bounce rate through the roof.
I think that context is so fundamental. The other thing to get a little bit more granular as well is just, and this ties into what you were saying, Tyler, a headline that sort of matches that promise and just tells you, yes, you have found what you're looking for, kind of thing, right? And there's just so many obscure or trying to be clever headlines that are used on landing pages that just don't really mean anything. And to the user, if they don't think that they've actually found what they're looking for, especially if the advertisement in question is from search, where it's a very active sort of intent-driven type of context, they're going to bounce almost right away, right? Because like they're looking for something really specific, and users nowadays are really trained that, unless they find what they're looking for, they just hit back and go to the next one, right? And, try that, go back, go to the next one. And they're used to getting that information really, really quickly. And so a mismatch in terms of that context and that experience is a surefire way of having a landing page that doesn't perform well.
For sure.
I agree. I think fluffy writing is what I think of too when I think of bad landing pages. Like, it really should follow that journalist style of like the first paragraph, the inverse pyramid, right? Where like the first paragraph has to have the when, the where, the who. Like, give me all of the things that you promised me in the ad. Otherwise, I'm gone. Like, cut the fluff.
Yeah. I'm curious, Tyler, and you, Santana, like what you both feel about gated content. Because there's been all of these, at least from my perspective, I've seen a lot of sort of arguments around gated content and should we gate content? Should we not gate content? I think that it's a worthwhile strategy in some contexts to drive leads, depending on the product and depending on the business model, etc. However, I do also think that, consumers, and especially in a B2B context, people have just felt so burned by filling out a form and getting a horrible ebook or a horrible PDF download, and there's not really any useful information in it. And that experience has just been so bad that gated content strategy, I just think is far less valuable now than it used to be.
I would agree. Like, I can count the number of times that I've, from like a design form that I've filled out and been like, oh, this is going to be so great. and then the content is just not valuable at all. It's just like very elementary. It's just tying you to the next piece that they're trying to upsell you on. And so I think that's everyone has had that experience. Like, can anyone in these three little boxes here tell me a time when they've signed up for gated content and like, oh, this is super useful, I'm going to go and turn around this and use this in my day to day? Probably not. And so I think that taste in people's mouth is probably almost rendered it irrelevant at this point. But that's just my point of view.
I think the two things is, if you really want that information, I think number one, like, always make sure you have places for brand advocates to follow along. Like, if people want to join your mailing list, have areas where people can willingly give their information and sign up for your content if they're into it, because like that's beneficial to them and you, but don't make it mandatory. And also, there are better ways to capture that if you're looking for it, like host a webinar or do something that like,
Totally.
provides high value and people are expecting to give their information on. I think it's the bait and switch. I think a lot of this episode is going to center around that idea of the bait and switch, right?
I like the webinar piece. I think, ebooks and downloadable PDFs are kind of just like flyers, it's kind of junk mail. But yeah, to your point, like content like a webinar, video content that, you would pay for otherwise is probably a little bit more valuable. But yeah, showing a mock-up of an ebook or something there as an incentivized download for gated content, I don't know that that's going to fly anymore.
And this ties into is sort of what we've been talking about landing pages and how you can get it wrong, is that there's no upfront value exchange. So you land on that page, you're expected to immediately give some kind of information to convert into a lead or something along those lines. But there's no actual value exchange yet, right? And so it's all upfront for the actual end user. And I think that, organizations that actually give some kind of value upfront on that landing page. And so Tyler, you mentioned like video content or something like that. In a B2B context, for example, like, you can provide a partial demo and then ask for additional information to kind of go deeper and those types of things. And there's ways of sort of like at least having some of that value up front and then asking for a value exchange for additional information or something along those lines, right? And it just like it changes that context and it starts to build trust before having to give out information. And I mean, so many people just get so much spam that it's I feel like people feel so burnt about lead forms at this stage.
No one wants another email that they weren't expecting.
What are the key elements of a high converting landing page, and how has that changed, if at all, in the past few years?
I mean, from my perspective, it's like clarity is the number one thing, right? And that's probably never changed back in the days of print advertising. And what I might say is almost the golden era of copywriting, where, print ads actually had some copywriting in them. They weren't just like headlines, or they weren't just like brand names and those types of things. I feel like clarity and sort of speaking to the end user has always been important, right? And always will be important. It's something that is so critical in advertising creative. And so why should that stop as soon as you land on a landing page, right? And so just being super clear about, what that value exchange is, what the purpose of the page is, what the purpose of the organization is. The amount of times that I've landed on a landing page and then just don't even know what's being sold is way too much. And I think that just having that clarity and being able to cut to the chase is so important, because no one has a attention span to be spending minutes on a landing page trying to figure out what you do. You need to tell people right up front.
I agree. Clarity. We talked about it earlier too, and on the theme of the bait and switch is like delivering on whatever promise you said you were going to give them that got them to this point. And that comes down to copy and how you message that and the tone of voice. I think, as much as we hate the forms and that sort of info capture, if you do end up trusting the landing page and the brand and where you are, you will have to have some sort of info capture there. I would try and keep that at a bare minimum and just get the information you need to, whatever that might be, follow up with a quote, a demo, a sales call, but keep those barriers to a minimum and just the information that you need to populate your sales call and your CRM. I think trust signals are super important. Eric, you mentioned trust. You can have things like case studies on there, or testimonials, or awards, or accolades. All of those things will resonate with different people. Some people are savvy enough to, like, maybe they bought that award. Who knows? But I think some of those trust signals are very important. We see, clients that have things like free trials and free samples. That free is enough incentive to get you there, but then you're capturing information. So other trust signals as to, like, why you required this information. That's to your point, clarity around that. A lot of times it helps if there's no strings attached, no credit cards, things like that. So you're taking that, like, commitment away and just giving the people what they want. All of those things, I think, help. Some of it is fluff, and some of them I think people are used to, but there's validity around some of those things. We just did a UI UX audit for a client, and logo gardens are still very useful, even though there's not interactions there. People go through those, like, I recognize that, I recognize that, I recognize them, and you'll see them hover around and even sometimes try and click on them to see if they're clickable, to, like, because they want to trust something. They want to see something that they recognize and trust. So all of those things at least help to that decision-making process, and I think are beneficial elements to those pages.
Yeah, those are those social proof signals, right?
Yeah.
No one wants to be the first to try something.
No.
Unless you have some kind of personal relationship with people that work there or something like that. But yeah, you need to sort of break through that and be like, hey, these people have been successful with whatever this product or service is. And it can be logo gardens. It can be, reviews, as long as they look real as well. Basically, it's just saying, like, 5-star reviews. People are pretty savvy with those types of things, right? Or if it looks like it was all generated by AI nowadays, that can also be a problem. And so just trying to establish some of those trust signals for sure.
I think that's a big difference too from now and 10 years ago. Like, to the question of what's changed between now and then, is like, not a lot has changed in terms of good writing is good writing. But I do think that maybe consumers are more aware now. Like, they've seen a lot of landing pages and they know what to look for and what not to look out for.
The other thing, and this is going to be sort of similar to what we were talking about before with context, but trying to map out the different stages of user intent that a user may have as they're evaluating the organization or the product or service. So, and just being really deliberate about how that landing page is meant to talk to that user intent, right? And so, are you targeting people and sending them to this landing page in the research phase? What type of information do they need in order to make a decision there? We were talking about, some kind of value exchange, having some kind of video demo or something like that. Instead of an actual product demo, maybe it's more about talking about problem statements and talking about solutions in the industry, or some kind of educational content as that first sort of value that you're providing on that landing page, right? And so really being deliberate about what is the intent of the users that we're sending to this page can be really, really important as well. And that is going to differ drastically if it's a TikTok ad or a search ad or a meta ad or a YouTube video ad or something along those lines. That's all different user intents and stages in the marketing funnel. And, we need to treat that content differently for each of those.
You took my question. I was going to ask, do you think that different stages of the funnel need different landing pages? Should we only be using landing pages for bottom funnel?
I guess you have my answer.
It depends where you are in the funnel. We've talked about the definition of a landing page. So I think depending on where you are, you may be sending them to different places, right? I think at top funnel, you may just want to send them to the homepage. And like we said, the homepage should be your best landing page. As they gather more intent, more consideration, and they're ready, I think you can start to curate what that looks like and send them to more curated pages depending on where they are in the funnel. But I think there's different opportunities and different places to send them depending on where they are in their journey, for sure.
And do you think that landing pages should cater to specific customer segments or focus on a broader audience? Like, should we be doing more personalization in our pages?
I think that depends on your budget.
Okay, that's a really real answer.
But I'm going to go back. I've used this example before, maybe not in this group, but I don't know if you're familiar with the brand Tushy. Do you remember? It's the e-com bidet product.
Right.
When they came out into market, they used persona segmentation and had campaigns to specific audiences. And I would have loved to have been a part of this team that figured this out and like the brainstorming, because they basically had campaigns specific to different audiences. So they had men and women, they had different diversity groups, they had LGBTQ, and then they had like different use case, like pregnant women, for instance. And each campaign had their set of ads, but also curated landing pages. And all the landing pages, even though the product was the same, they spoke to different features and benefits that were specifically curated to these groups. Not only that, but the copy and the tone of voice all fit under sort of the brand tone of voice, but the way they were speaking to their audience was so specific to them, whether it was an older tone of voice, speaking to a dude like a dude and a woman like a woman, speaking to the LGBTQ community and speaking to specific, use cases for pregnant women. It was so well thought out. And I think when you have that kind of strategy and you have that kind of concepting and creation and campaigns that deliver your audiences to a specific landing page, I feel like if you can create that environment, that experience is so much better, right? I think right then you've gained that trust because you see this ad and you're like, this person's actually speaking to me. It doesn't say Tyler, but I'm this persona. And then you get filtered into a landing page that answers all your questions that you have about the product out the gate. It's like very anticipatory. If you have the power to like figure it out and do that, and the budget, obviously, then I think that's the dream scenario. But I will forever and always refer back to those initial Tushy campaigns because they were just like, they were perfect. If there is such a thing when it comes to our business.
So you're all for it, in other words.
I'm all for it if you can do it. Yeah, if you have the budget, the people power, the resources, I think so. I think it just delivers you a personalized experience, and that's what people are looking for, right?
I'm curious about your take on the budget piece because I started my career in web development, right? And so from my perspective, building of landing pages, you want to make them as modular as possible so that you can maintain the speed component because it's so important to be able to swap out different components, try different ways of speaking to those different personas. Even if you only have a single landing page, being able to do multivariant testing or whatnot, and just moving quickly, I think is really important, especially for small brands, right? And they don't need fancy software. And I think that like a lot of the technology can sometimes get in the way of that speed.
Yes.
And from my perspective anyways, really trying to get to the point where landing pages don't take months to create, don't take a ton of resources is so important, and building that infrastructure so that you can make quick changes. Because yeah, you're right. I mean, like for certain organizations, building out a campaign like that, just the landing pages alone might be hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? In order to like design them all and get all of the content written and all of that. And if you have that type of budget and you want to, deploy it in that way, great. But a lot of smaller organizations can't compete at that level. So what can they do, right? And I think that making sure that if you're working with an agency or you're working with, even a contractor, developer kind of thing, or a dev shop, just making sure that they have those kinds of things in mind are so important, because going through the rigmarole of rebuilding landing pages and taking weeks or months to build every landing page just really is a tough place to be in.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure Tushy, when they did this, their budgets were larger, but they were very efficient in like how they created the landing pages. Like the ads themselves they're all templated, right? So it was plug and play in terms of persona image, copy specific to persona, and then the landing pages were templated. They didn't differ in terms of the amount of components or sections they had,
right.
But the thought that went into each one of those components, even when it came down to image selection, copy, tone of voice, all those, was very, very considerate towards the audience. So it was well designed from tip to tail, from the layouts all the way to the user experience on the landing pages. So there's efficiencies of scale and things that can be had there. I think you can scale that down to, a smaller budget. It doesn't mean you have to hit all of those, right? You can
Yeah.
still curate audience. You can still curate your campaigns and your landing pages to split test them to two personas or two audiences or two products. The idea there is the personalization of it, right? It's how granular do you want to get when it comes to that personalization, but you can scale it to a budget, I think.
Where my mind goes when I hear about that level of personalization though is with privacy laws, do we even have the like ability to target people to that granular level with ads anymore? Like, could we not accidentally have random young men getting hit with the pregnant lady ads by accident because they're on a weird side of the algorithm? Like, do we have the tailoring at our ad for that?
Yes. Well, didn't we just do an episode on how ad targeting is not that precise?
That's why I'm asking.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. There's going to be lots of sort of crossover. And if you try to get too precise in terms of the persona that you're trying to hit, then you're definitely going to get people from other personas in there. Unfortunately, that's just what comes with advertising, though, right? And so you're never going to have it in a perfect place where only pregnant women are going to your pregnant woman landing page, kind of thing, right? But at the same time, if you have enough scale, and in that particular case study with Tushy,
Not sponsored.
they have enough scale, right? It's like anyone with a toilet, right, is kind of loosely in their market, right? And so they have enough scale, and I think that it works in those particular cases. But if you're making CRM software or something like that, getting hyper granular with landing pages and targeting might be a little bit more difficult, unless you see that scale on the search side where it's like really precise in terms of being able to target intent. But yeah, you're right. Demographic information can be much tougher depending on what you're trying to target.
Do we have any quick tips on optimizing for landing page performance? Like we've got landing pages, how do we make them better, do we think? Or how do we look at the data to say like areas that could be improved?
Well, from a data person perspective, I would say get a really good partner who understands the sort of nuance with testing and understands the nuance of statistical power and such with landing page testing. I think in my career, anyways, I've seen a lot of tests, both in landing page contexts or in creative contexts, etc., that are supposedly statistically significant, but would not be defensible if you were to actually dig into the data, right? And so, it's really important to make decisions based off of actual performance. And so, having a good partner, there's a number of them out there that are tied directly to software that can be installed on landing pages for testing and multivariate testing and all of those kinds of things. Having a good partner that is willing to tell you, hey, actually the thing that you're trying to test is not big enough, you're not going to get a significant result anyway, so take bigger swings, or hey, you can't test 27 different versions of this landing page or something like that. A partner that is willing to be a truth teller, I think, is really important with this type of testing. And there's a number of CRO firms out there and landing page optimization software as well that are on that side.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I would say understand your user and their behavior. There's lots of tools out there. You can try them for free, mouse trackers and things like that. Again, like the Hotjars and the mouse flows and the full stories of the world. It's interesting just to sit behind the screen and watch your user interact with your digital property and see what it is they're doing. You learn so much, and a lot of it is very fundamental and elementary, but until you see it happen, you don't sometimes realize it. The other thing is once you understand that user, design for that user and those behaviors. Don't design for yourself. I think a lot of times us as brands and as creatives and as marketers, we're probably the more savvy of the bunch. And so oftentimes you get into this trap where you're like, well, I understand this. Obviously, like I could find it, but that's not necessarily who it is you're designing for. So, lots of testing, but I also say like it's in our world, it's okay to build in redundancy into these experiences because you don't know how people are interacting with your website, your digital properties. Everyone navigates a different way. Some of them use top main navigation. Some of them go down to the bottom footer because it's like a sitemap and they can see everything. Some people like to scroll and interact and engage with everything. So you want to be able to design to all of those people to ensure that you're addressing and accommodating their behaviors and how they like to interact with your brand and your journey and your product. So I think to Eric's point, partner up with someone who understands that, has an outside of opinion on that. And because I think brands get so sort of introspective and navel gazing that they think they have a solution, but that solution isn't necessarily the right solution for the people out there that are their potential customers. So.
Yeah. And the last thing I would say on this as well is set the right incentives, because just focusing on conversion rate is a recipe for disaster, right? And so if you just generate a whole pile of like low quality leads, you're not actually driving business results, right? And so just making sure that you're really thinking about the experience that you're putting in front of those users, but then you're tying that experience back to the results you want to see in the business. And then what are the right KPIs to track to actually optimize your landing page experience towards? That is going to drive the business forward, right? And it's typically not going to be just conversion rate. It could be conversion rate tied with something else. So for example, it could be like average value per user or something along those lines, which is tying it back to the sort of bottom of funnel or down funnel events that are happening, the actual sales.
And to your point, Eric, I would add on, think about the workflow after. Like, what happens to those users after they get the thing? Like, do you have a plan in place for like email follow-ups, or what is that, like, that wholesome experience look like?
Yeah.
That's a great point, especially if it comes to leads. It's like, if this works and is successful, do you have the resources and the ability to respond and accommodate and deal with the influx of what you may have?
Yeah. Do you have to double your sales headcount just to handle all the leads? But then do you double your sales head count and realize all the leads are crap? So then, they're not actually, there's no sell through, right? So yeah, there's more to it than just optimizing that landing page.
Totally. Or it's a really long sales cycle and they're going to have to hear from you 8 more times before they even think about talking to you, right?
Right.
And do you have those 8 more times planned out?
Yeah.
Any last rants or parting thoughts on landing pages?
I have one quick thing. One thing I have heard more chatter of on LinkedIn is, if you set up a campaign like this and you're generating leads through a landing page or whatnot, pick up the phone and call some of them, right? As a marketer, don't wait for feedback from your sales team, but actually just pick up the phone, put your money where your mouth is, so to speak, and just talk to them and see how interested they are. Like, what was their experience? Obviously, you have to do this in tandem with your sales team so that you don't ruffle too many feathers. But at the same time, getting that direct feedback can help you to address some of the objectives that those users are having, right? And that can feed back into the landing page experience. It can feed back into your campaigns as well. And getting as close as you can to that customer experience, I think, is really important.
I like that.
Love it.
Well, thanks, friends. Looks like we all had more opinions on landing pages than we thought.
Yeah.
This has been The Hypothesis. Thank you so much for tuning in. For show notes or to get in touch, find us at thehypothesisshow.com or at Thrive Digital, both linked for you in our description box. And if you liked today's episode, we'd love if you'd rate and review wherever you're listening or watching. Thanks.